Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing more than just picking stocks. We're going to deconstruct them, really try to find the hidden architecture that creates those truly market-defining companies. You know, the ones that generate real, sustainable alpha. This is all about building a brand new toolkit for a totally new economy. Okay, let's just dive right in with a huge question. What if the models we all use to value companies, the very bedrock of financial analysis, what if they're built for an economy that's, well, just disappearing? What if the old rules aren't just kind of bent, but are fundamentally broken for a whole new class of business? You see, to find an edge today, we first have to recognize that the market isn't just one single thing. It's really two distinct worlds, and they operate under completely different, almost physical laws. One world is predictable, it's stable. The other, it's chaotic, nonlinear, and it creates winners on a scale we've just never seen before. So on the left, you've got the classic world of diminishing returns. Think about things like steel mills or farming. Here, as you get bigger, each new thing you produce actually gets more expensive. Your returns, well, they diminish. But then on the right, you have the knowledge-based world of increasing returns. Here, the main resource is just an idea, like a piece of software or a drug formula. It's super expensive to create that first one, but it's almost free to replicate it. So as you grow, your returns actually increase, and that creates this wild dynamic where the winner can literally take almost everything. This slide really gets to the core engine at play here. The old world works like a thermostat. You know, if profits get too hot, competition kicks in and cools things down. It's always looking for balance. But the new world, it's a chain reaction. An early lead, maybe from a network effect or just a better product, creates this positive feedback loop that just magnifies that advantage and creates this explosive runaway growth. So, if these two worlds actually exist, how can you, as an investor, spot a company that's living in that new world of increasing returns? Well, the good news is you don't have to guess. It leaves behind a very specific financial fingerprint, a mathematical signature of its power. And that signature has a name: free cash flow convexity. Now think of free cash flow as the real cash a company has left over after paying for everything. This is the first big idea for finding an edge. It's not just about a company growing its cash flow. It's about the rate of that growth accelerating. It basically describes how a company can get exponentially more profitable as it gets bigger. Now, mathematically, it looks like this. And I know, don't let the calculus scare you. All this is really saying is that for every new dollar of revenue the company brings in, it generates more free cash flow than it did from the dollar that came before it. The conversion of sales into pure profit isn't just a straight line, it's accelerating upwards. And this table just illustrates the difference perfectly. A linear scalar, like a traditional manufacturer, kind of maintains a steady efficiency. But a convex scalar, it becomes a more powerful cash-generating machine with every single new dollar of revenue. Its profit on that next sale is huge, and its need for new capital, or CapEx, actually shrinks relative to its size. It's kind of like a car that becomes more fuel efficient the faster it goes. It's pretty wild. So how do we actually find this in the real world? This brings us to a practical toolkit you can start using to identify these rare companies, often before the market fully gets what's going on. This is all about finding that convexity before the stock gets a massive re-rating. The toolkit really has 3 key steps. First, you compare the growth rates. You want to see the company's free cash flow growing consistently faster than its revenue over several years. That's signal number 1. Second, analyze the margins. Don't just look at the average profit margin. You've got to calculate the incremental margin. How much cash do they make from their most recent growth? If it's way higher than the average, that's a huge sign. And finally, you assess CapEx, or capital spending. Is the company spending less and less on big investments as a percentage of its sales over time? This tells you it needs less fuel to power its growth engine. Okay, now we get to a really fascinating twist that challenges a core belief of modern finance. This is our second major variant: perception. It's a way to get an analytical edge just by questioning the stuff everyone takes for granted. So if you ask any finance pro this question, they'll almost always say the high-growth tech company is more sensitive, right? Because its value is all tied up in cash flows way out in the future. But what if that's just dangerously wrong? Some researchers from Neuberger Berman modeled this exact scenario, and when you look at the total enterprise value, that's the debt plus the equity, a 1% change in interest rates has a nearly identical impact on both companies. That alone is pretty surprising, but the real story is what happens next. And here is the big reveal. The second you strip out the fixed value of the debt and you only look at the equity, the part that shareholders like us actually own, the whole picture flips dramatically. the slower growing company's equity is way more sensitive to interest rate changes. That huge interest burden on its cash flows just makes its equity value so much more fragile. So the crucial point here is this. A massive fixed interest payment can actually be a bigger risk factor in a rising rate world than when your future cash flows are expected to arrive. The common wisdom that growth stocks are always the most rate sensitive, it's just incomplete. It turns out that the combination of slow growth and high debt creates the real fragility. Finding a convex business model is step one, but the final and maybe most critical filter, our third variant perception, is figuring out if that advantage is durable. Is this a true lock-in, or is it just some temporary hype that competition is going to eventually wipe out? And this brings us to the all-important idea of lock-in, a concept described by W. Brian Arthur, who's pretty much the pioneer of this whole increasing returns theory. It's what happens when that positive feedback loop gets so strong that it creates a permanent structural advantage. You see, a true lock-in isn't just having a high margin today. It's about these deep structural forces that make it nearly impossible for a competitor to come in and take over. So for example, think about network effects. A social media platform or a credit card network gets more valuable to you just because everybody else is also using it. Or what about high switching costs? Once an entire company is trained on a specific software suite, the cost and the sheer hassle of leaving are just immense. These are the hallmarks of a durable moat in this new world. And that really leaves us with a final question for every investor. In a world that is more and more defined by these winner-take-most dynamics, the old strategy of just hunting for what's statistically cheap might mean you're searching in the wrong world entirely. The real edge isn't in finding a bargain, it's in identifying the architectural blueprints of tomorrow's greatest companies before everyone else does.